welcome to Starbound. My name is General G, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Freyr and Remeke. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes in future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The Crucible had been broadcasting death for 3,000 years, and in all that time, nobody had ever mistaken it for anything but art. The structure itself floated in space in the way that only truly advanced civilizations could manage. 17 miles of amphitheater, spiraling around a central arena, suspended in space like a gossamer web, spun by gods, with a taste for blood and excellent acoustics. Today, it was packed with 2 trillion beings across 17 dimensions of viewing space, all tuned in to watch the galaxy's most elegant warriors dance their deadly ballet. And then there were the humans, with their primitive excuse for armor. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph on a pogo stick," muttered Lieutenant Naomi Cross, her Texas drawl thick enough to cut it with a plasma torch. "Would you look at this place? It's like Vegas had a baby with the Coliseum and raised it on a diet of pure acid." She stood in the prep chamber designed for Tier 2 primordial aggressives, a classification that had taken the Galactic Council's xenobiologists exactly 17 minutes to assign after watching Earth's military footage. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of condescension, cramped, unadorned, and positioned as far from the VIP sections as architecturally possible while still technically being inside the arena. "Could be worse," said Ravi Singe, the team's youngest member at 23 standard years. He was currently performing what appeared to be a religious ritual involving checking and rechecking his rifle's action for the 47th time. "Could be raining." "It's space, Singe," Cross replied, hefting a weapon that looked like someone had crossbred a howitzer with a fever dream. "It doesn't rain in space." "Could be space raining." "That's not a thing." "How do you know?" Gunnery Sergeant Ren Calder watched this exchange with the patience of a man who had spent 23 years in the Marines, and had learned that the universe's capacity for stupidity was matched only by its capacity for surprise. His mustache, a magnificent specimen that had achieved legendary status in 3 solar systems, twitched slightly. This was, for Ren, the equivalent of hysterical laughter. "Gentlemen, lady." His voice had the gravelly quality of a man who had shouted orders over the sound of artillery for most of his adult life. "Might I suggest we focus on the task at hand?" Through the chamber's viewing port, they could see the current exhibition, a Zaran noble in psychic-linked armor that flowed like liquid mercury, dancing through laser fire with grace. The Zaran, 7 feet of bioengineered perfection with skin like polished obsidian, each dodge was calculated by quantum processors wired directly into their nervous system, each counterattack guided by tactical AIs that had been studying warfare for centuries. The crowd roared approval as the Zaran's plasma lance carved through their opponent's shield, ending the fight in a burst of light that would have made fireworks weep with envy. "Fancy," Cross observed. "Real fancy. All that tech, all that beauty, all that—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Preformative posturing." "I think it's elegant," Singe admitted. "Makes you wonder what they think of us." As if summoned by his words, the arena's main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at themselves through the broadcast feed. The caption, helpfully translated into several dozen languages, read, "The Terran specimens. Primitive armor, technology meets curious weapons design." "Specimens," Ren repeated, his mustache performing a complex maneuver that might have been amusement. "Well, that's not ominous at all." The camera lingered on their gear with the kind of fascination usually reserved for a particularly interesting roadkill, and it was, objectively, an odd sight. Where the other warriors wore armor that seemed grown rather than built, the humans looked like they had been assembled in a garage by someone with more enthusiasm than sense. Ren's exosuit was a monument to function over form. Titanium-reinforced graphene plates over a hydraulic frame that hissed and wheezed with each movement. Power cables snaked across his back like mechanical dreadlocks, feeding into a generator that rumbled with the deep satisfaction of controlled internal combustion. His helmet was a brick of sensor-resistant ceramic, with a visor that belonged on a welding mask rather than a warrior's crown. Cross's rig was even more exotic. Her suit had been modified with additional stabilization systems and what appeared to be shock absorbers bolted directly to her spine. Her weapon of choice, the Cannonback 5000, was slung across her back like a particularly aggressive musical instrument. Singe's gear was the lightest of the three, but light was relative when discussing equipment designed to help humans survive their own weaponry. His sniper rifle was longer than he was tall, and the recoil compensators attached to his suit's shoulders looked like they could double as landing gear for a small spacecraft. From their chamber, the specimens could hear the crowd outside laughing and jeering at their primitive armor. "You know what I think?" Cross said, watching the broadcast commentary speculate about whether human technology was actually technology or just very sophisticated rocks. "I think they're about to learn something important." "What's that?" Singe asked. Cross grinned, and for a moment, the prep chamber felt several degrees warmer. "That there's a reason our armor doesn't need to be pretty." The arena floor was 2 miles across and could reconfigure itself into any environment the crowd desired. Today, it had chosen urban warfare, which meant broken buildings, scattered debris, and plenty of cover for the kind of tactical maneuvering that made for good television. High above, in the council's observation deck, beings of beauty and intelligence watched the preparations with the interest of art critics examining a particularly puzzling avant-garde installation. Council Velith of the Zaran hegemony was 7.5 feet of genetically perfected bureaucrat, with features that had been sculpted by 10,000 years of selective breeding and a few discrete modifications. Her psychic aura projected calm authority and just a hint of amused condescension. "I still maintain this is frivolous," she murmured. "These Terrans barely qualify." Beside her, Grand Speaker Theox of the Malari Confederacy rippled his agreement. The Malari were descendants of something that might have been jellyfish, if the jellyfish had developed opposable thumbs and a talent for bureaucracy. Theox's form shifted through colors that had no names in human languages, expressing concepts too complex for mere words. "But the entertainment value should be significant." He pulsed in shades of deep purple, shot through with gold. "Our audience enjoys variety, and the contrast should prove educational. Though I confess, their primary kinetic weapon is a paradox that troubles our analysts." "How so?" Velith asked. "Its energy source appears to be a primitive chemical reaction, yet it still achieves projectile velocities that cause fatalities. It's crude, but it works far better than it has any right to." The third member of their group said nothing, because War Master Krykor of the Varn Collective had not spoken aloud in 47 years. The Varn believed that words were what you used when violence was insufficient, and Krykor had found violence to be remarkably sufficient for most situations. He simply stood, all 9 feet and half a ton of him, and watched the arena floor. Below, the human team was entering through Gate 7, and the crowd's reaction was complex. Laughter, certainly, some confusion, a growing undercurrent of anticipation that felt different from the usual pre-battle excitement. "Look at them," Velith breathed. "They move like labored apes. Where is the grace, the artistry, the integration of warrior and weapon into perfect unity?" Ren moved with the unhurried demeanor of a man who had survived 2 decades of military service by never rushing into anything he couldn't shoot his way out of. Cross bounded forward in great hydraulic-assisted leaps, her stabilizers automatically adjusting for the arena's artificial gravity. Singe moved like smoke made solid, his suit's servos whisper quiet as he flowed from cover to cover. "No neural integration," observed Theox. his form shifting to skeptical amber. No AI assistance, no psychic enhancement whatsoever. How do they coordinate? How do they process combat data? How do they achieve tactical awareness without... He was interrupted by Wren's voice cackling over the arena's communication system. The Crucible's broadcast frequency was, to Wren's professional disgust, completely unencrypted. Arrogance, he mused, was the best backdoor. His words boomed across 2 trillion speakers in perfect, unaccented galactic standard. Cross, you take high ground. Singe, find a perch and start counting targets. I'll walk straight down the middle and make myself pretty for the cameras.
Copy that, Gunny, came Cross's reply. And for the record, you're already plenty pretty.
Flatterer. Velith blinked slowly, which for a Zarin was equivalent to a spit take.
Did they just coordinate their entire tactical deployment in plain language over an open channel?
It would appear so, Theox replied, his color cycling through confusion. Perhaps their translators are malfunctioning. Down in the arena, their opponents were taking the field. The Malari had sent their finest. Champion Kesseron, a warrior poet whose armor was grown rather than forged, and whose weapon was less a tool than an extension of his own will. He moved like liquid light, and where he passed, the very air seemed to sing. The crowd loved him. Kesseron had won 47 consecutive battles, each one a masterpiece of tactical artistry. His fighting style had been studied in military academies, his techniques copied by AIs, his victories celebrated in songs that would outlive stars. He was beautiful, perfect, and absolutely confident that the next few minutes would be a pleasant warm-up before the real competition began. This confidence lasted until Wren Calder stepped into the center of the arena, reached over his shoulder, and unstrapped something that had been masquerading as a backpack. The Cannonback 5000 was what happened when human engineers looked at the concept of shoulder-fired artillery and decided that the shoulder in question just needed to be properly reinforced. Wren set the weapon's bipod legs, locked his suit stabilizers, and activated the spinal reinforcement system that would keep his vertebrae from becoming a fine powder. The weapon's barrel was 3 feet long and nearly 4 inches wide. Its ammunition was not bullets in any conventional sense, but tungsten rods that weighed as much as a brick and traveled at velocities that made physics professors weep. Kesseron, to his credit, recognized a threat when he saw one. His armor's AI immediately began calculating trajectories, analyzing the weapon's design, and recommending evasive maneuvers. The champion raised his plasma lance and prepared to demonstrate why energy weapons were superior to primitive kinetic systems. He was still preparing when Wren pulled the trigger. The cannonback didn't fire so much as detonate. The recoil was a physical force that would have shattered unaugmented human bones, but Wren's suit absorbed the impact and channeled it into the arena floor, which crackled in a spiderweb pattern extending 30 feet in every direction. The tungsten rod crossed the 2-mile arena in 0.3 seconds. Kesseron's AI had exactly enough time to register the projectile's approach and begin executing an evasive maneuver. It was not enough time to complete the maneuver. The rod struck Kesseron's center mass with the force of a meteor impact. His beautiful armor, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb plasma bursts, reacted to kinetic impact the way fine china reacts to sledgehammers. What had been a champion became a rapidly expanding cloud of glittering fragments, and the arena fell absolutely silent. The silence stretched for long seconds, filled only by the cannonback's cooling system cycling and Wren's voice, calm and conversational. "Singe, you seeing any more dancers?"
"Negative, Gunny. Target down, area secure."
War Master Crykor, who had not spoken in 47 years, broke his silence with a single word that translated roughly as adequate. Down in the arena, Wren was already reloading the cannonback.
The crowd was finding its voice again, and the sound was like nothing the Crucible had ever heard. Not the cultured appreciation of artistry, but something rawer and more primitive. Awe, perhaps, or fear. The next challenge appeared, a Varn shock trooper in neural-linked power armor, supported by a squad of psychic-enhanced drones. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Cross's voice crackled across the comm. "Gunny, you want to handle the big boy, or should I introduce him to Mama's cooking?" Wren considered this for exactly 2 seconds. "Your show, Lieutenant. Try not to break the arena." "No promises." Cross bounded into view, her suit's hydraulics hissing with each leap. She had unslung her own weapon, something that looked like it had been designed by someone who had seen a grenade launcher and decided it needed to be much, much angrier. The Varn trooper was impressive. 9 feet of cybernetically enhanced muscle in armor that interfaced directly with his nervous system. His weapon was a plasma cannon that could melt through starship hulls, and his support drones moved in perfect coordination, their attacks synchronized by quantum entanglement. He opened fire with the confidence of a being who had never lost a battle, his plasma streams carving through the air. Cross ignored the light show entirely. She planted her feet, activated her suit's full stabilization system, and fired something that was less a grenade and more a tungsten brick with an attitude problem. The projectile hit the Varn's center mass and kept going, carrying him backward through 2 buildings and into the arena wall with a sound like the universe's largest gong being struck by an asteroid. The support drones, suddenly without their neural link, began spinning in confused circles. Singe's rifle spoke once from somewhere in the ruins, and the drones became scrap metal. "Well," said Cross, lighting what appeared to be an actual tobacco cigarette. "That was refreshing." In the silence that followed, someone in the crowd began to clap. Then someone else joined in. Then someone else. Within moments, the sound was deafening. Not the refined appreciation of the Crucible's usual audience, but the sound of recognition. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was convened in the time it took for the arena's medical drones to finish collecting what remained of the Varn shock trooper, which is to say, it was a very short session. "This is unacceptable," Council Velith declared, her psychic aura projecting authority with enough force to make nearby furniture sit up straighter. "These Terrans are not warriors, they are barbarians, savages. They bring crude weapons into an arena of art, and—" "They won," War Master Crykor interrupted, his voice carrying the finality of a closing tomb. "Quickly, efficiently, without drama." "Without art," Velith protested. "Without grace, without any consideration for the elegance of combat." Theox rippled thoughtfully, his form cycling through analytical purples and golds. "The question becomes, do we allow them to continue?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The Crucible had been operating under the same rules for 3,000 years. Warriors entered, warriors fought, the best warrior won. The system had worked because everyone understood the unspoken agreement that war was art, and art had rules. The humans, it seemed, had not read the rules. "They are scheduled for the gauntlet tomorrow," Theox continued. 7 opponents, escalating difficulty, broadcast to the entire galaxy. The ratings projections are unusual. Indeed they were. Across the galaxy, beings who had never shown interest in the Crucible were suddenly tuning in. Military analysts were studying the footage frame by frame. Weapons manufacturers were hastily redesigning their entire product lines. And somewhere in the depths of space, on a blue-green world that had only recently joined the galactic community, recruitment centers were reporting their busiest day in human history. "Let them fight," Crykor said finally. "But set the parameters to maximum difficulty. If they survive, they have earned their place. If they die—" He shrugged, a gesture that made his armor plates clank like coins in a pocket. "The problem solves itself." Down in the prep chambers, the human team was discovering what passed for alien hospitality. "Well, this is cozy," Cross observed, looking around their assigned quarters. The room was approximately the size of a storage closet, furnished with what appeared to be 3 mediation crystals and a bowl of something that might have been food arranged in a geometric shape. Could be worse, Singe said automatically, then caught himself. Actually, no. I can't think of how this could be worse. This is actively worse than boot camp, and boot camp included a week where our drill instructor made us eat nothing but nutritionally complete paste. I'm still convinced it was actually just chalk and glue. Wren was examining the humming food shapes with the expression of a man who has eaten MREs in combat zones and was not easily intimidated by alien cuisine. Well, he said finally, it's probably not going to kill us any faster than tomorrow's fights will. He bit into one of the geometric objects. His mustache performed several complex maneuvers that might have indicated contemplation, resignation, or possibly nausea. Tastes like chicken, he announced. Really? Singe asked hopefully. No. Tastes like sadness and industrial lubricant, but it's protein. Cross was busy running diagnostics on her suit, which had performed admirably during the day's exhibition but was showing some concerning stress patterns in the stabilization system. My grandmother always said if you're going to do something stupid, you might as well do it with style. Even so, I don't think she meant whatever those chuckle fucks are doing. They've turned fighting into performance art. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman, Wren replied. She was, also completely insane. Always said she'd rather go out fighting than fading. Cross paused in her diagnostics, her hands stilling on the controls. You know what I keep thinking about? What's that? Nobody asked us why we're here. Wren raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning every other species sends their best warriors, their champions, their artists of war. We sent 3 Marines who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when Earth got its invitation to this fancy party. Singe nodded slowly. She's right. We're not champions. I barely made it through basic. Cross is good with weapons, but she's not some legendary warrior. And Gunny, no offense, but you're just a regular Marine. None taken, Wren replied. But that might be the point. They looked at him questioningly. Think about it, he continued. They see war as art, as performance, as something beautiful and rare and special, but for us, war isn't art. It's something you survive, not something you perfect. Cross was nodding slowly. So when they see us fight, they're not seeing our best, Wren finished. They're seeing our normal. The thought hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Well, Singe said finally, that's either comforting or absolutely terrifying. Why not both? Cross replied and went back to her diagnostics. Outside their chamber, the crucible hummed with activity as the galaxy prepared to watch 3 humans face 7 of the finest warriors in known space. Betting pools were being established. Military observers were taking notes. And somewhere in the depths of the arena's data cores, AIs were running calculations and coming up with answers that made their quantum processors skip cycles. The humans, unaware of the chaos they had already caused, settled in for the night. None of them slept particularly well, but then they were used to that. The Gauntlet was the Crucible's signature event, an escalating series of challenges designed to test every aspect of a warrior's skill. It began with individual combat and progressed through increasingly complex scenarios, culminating in a battle against the arena's ultimate champion. In 3,000 years, only 47 beings had successfully completed all 7 levels. Their names were inscribed on monuments that sang their victories to the stars. The humans walked onto the arena floor to face Level 1 with the enthusiasm of people reporting for jury duty. Remind me again why we agreed to this? Singe asked, shouldering his rifle and trying not to look at the 2 trillion beings watching their every move. Because the alternative was being classified as a non-combatant species, and spending the rest of human history being treated like the galaxy's pet hamsters, Cross replied, bouncing lightly on her hydraulic stabilizers. Pet hamsters get food and housing provided, Singe pointed out. Pet hamsters also get put in cages.
Fair point.
Ren was studying their first opponent through his visor's tactical display. The Zarin champion, a replacement for the late, lamented Kesseron, was a study in engineered perfection. 12 feet of psychic-enhanced muscle wrapped in armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. "Name's Valor," Ren announced, reading from his suit's database. 237 victories. Specializes in close-quarters combat with psionic enhancement. Armor is integrated with 17 separate AI systems and a quantum processing matrix.
Fancy,
Cross observed. Very fancy. Also, according to this, he considers himself an artist.
Well then, Singe said, chambering around. Let's give him something to paint with.
The arena's starting horn sounded like the death cry of a mechanical god, and Valor began his approach. It was, objectively, beautiful, a flowing advance that seemed choreographed by physics itself. Each step perfectly calculated for maximum efficiency and elegance. He closed half the distance to the humans in 3 seconds. Ren shot him. The cannon back spoke once, its voice a thunderclap that shook dust from the arena's highest reaches. The tungsten rod caught Valor mid-leap, and the Zarin champion discovered that 17 AI systems and quantum processing were no match for simple momentum. "Level 1 complete!" the arena's announcer declared, though there was a note of confusion in the translated voice. "Time, 4 seconds. New record."
That's gotta be embarrassing, Singe commented,
watching the cleanup drones converge on what remained of their opponent. Level 2 brought out a squad of Malari war dancers, beings who fought in perfect psychic coordination, their movements synchronized across dimensions that human minds couldn't properly perceive. They flowed across the arena floor like a living kaleidoscope, their weapons tracing patterns of light that were reportedly hypnotic to watch. Cross introduced them to the concept of area effect weaponry. Her first shot, a tungsten fléché round designed for crowd control, turned the squad's perfect coordination into perfect chaos. The survivors scattered, their psychic link broken, their dance reduced to a desperate scramble for cover. Singe picked them off one by one with lethal, unfaltering accuracy. "Level 2 complete! Time, 43 seconds!"
Now that, Cross announced, was more like it.
Level 3 was where things got interesting. The Varn had learned from their earlier defeat and sent not one warrior, but a full combat unit. 12 cybernetically enhanced soldiers in power armor, supported by aerial drones and field artillery. The humans went to work like a well-oiled machine, which was exactly what they were. Cross laid down suppressing fire that turned cover into flying debris. Singe moved like smoke, using the arena's terrain to his advantage. Ren advanced straight up the middle, his armor soaking up return fire, while he methodically eliminated targets with the patience of a man doing inventory. Level 3 complete! Time, 2 minutes, 17 seconds! In the observation deck, Council Velith was making sounds that had no translation in any known language. Her psychic aura was projecting emotions that ranged from horror to fascination to something that might have been respect. "They're not even trying to be artistic," she whispered. "They're just efficient." "Terrifyingly efficient," Theox agreed, his form cycling through shades of deep concern. "They move like a single organism. No wasted motion, no unnecessary risks, no grand gestures or artistic flourishes." War Master Krykor said nothing, but his hand moved unconsciously to the weapon at his side. Level 4 brought the hegemony's pride, a Triton-class warrior in full battle regalia, surrounded by a defensive matrix of energy shields and support drones. The warrior itself was a masterpiece of bioengineering and cybernetic enhancement. 15 feet of perfectly coordinated destruction. The Triton lasted almost 3 minutes against the humans, which was actually impressive. It fell when Singe put a depleted uranium slug through its primary sensor array. Ren destroyed its shield generator with a shot that left his own armor smoking, and Cross finished it off with something she called Uncle Billy's fishing tackle, a weapon that appeared to fire explosive harpoons. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were watching in the kind of silence that usually accompanied religious experiences or natural disasters. The betting pools had crashed. Military observers were sending increasingly frantic reports to their home governments. And somewhere in the depths of space, human recruitment centers were running out of application forms. 3 more levels, Singe observed, reloading.
Yep,
Cross agreed.
wonder what they'll throw at us next.
Level 5 was where the Crucible traditionally separated the warriors from the heroes. It wasn't about individual combat or even squad tactics. It was about survival in the face of impossible odds. The arena floor reconfigured itself into an urban warfare scenario. 3 square miles of ruined city, populated with automated defenses, hunter-killer drones, and environmental hazards designed to test every aspect of a warrior's skill. Most challengers spent hours navigating the maze, their progress tracked by billions of viewers as they demonstrated tactical brilliance, individual heroism, and the kind of inspired decision-making that legends were built on. The humans took one look at the scenario and decided to ignore it entirely. "Singe," Ren said, his voice calm and conversational, "what's our ammunition status?"
43 rounds for the cannon back, 67 for my rifle, and Cross has... How many fishing tackle rounds do you have left? Enough,
Cross replied, which in Marine speak meant anywhere from barely sufficient to I could level a small moon if properly motivated. "Right. Here's what we're gonna do. Singe, find the highest point with clear sightlines. Cross, you're with me. We're gonna walk straight through the middle and break everything that tries to stop us." In the observation deck, military analysts from 17 different species leaned forward in fascination. This was not how Level 5 was supposed to be approached. The maze was designed to be navigated, not conquered. The defenses were meant to be avoided or cleverly disabled, not simply overpowered through brute force. The humans, as had become their habit, had not read the manual. Singe found a collapsed skyscraper that gave him lines of sight across most of the arena. His first shot disabled the central command node that was coordinating the automated defenses. His second shot took out the primary power coupling that fed the hunter-killer drone network.
Area denial systems are down, he reported. You're clear for a straight-line approach.
Ren and Cross began their advance, and it was like watching a natural disaster in slow motion. They didn't dodge obstacles, they removed them. They didn't sneak past defenses, they destroyed them. When a building blocked their path, Cross introduced it to Uncle Billy's fishing tackle. When automated turrets opened fire, Ren's return shots reduced them to component atoms. They moved with the inexorable patience of erosion, and like erosion, they could not be stopped, only endured. "This is wrong," Council Velith whispered, her psychic projections cycling through confusion and growing alarm. "They're supposed to demonstrate finesse, tactical awareness, the ability to overcome obstacles through cleverness and skill." "They are demonstrating tactical awareness," Theox replied, his colors shifting to bemused orange. "They've simply chosen to define obstacle as anything that can be destroyed by sufficient application of force." "But that's not how war works." War Master Crykor finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of 47 years of accumulated wisdom. "That is exactly how war works. Everything else is just art." Down in the arena, the humans were discovering that Level 5's final challenge was a squad of elite Varn commandos in stealth armor, supported by cloaked sniper positions and psychic dampening fields. The commandos had made their first mistake by assuming that human technology was as primitive as it appeared. Their second mistake was assuming that humans fought by the same rules as everyone else. Their final mistake was assuming that Singe needed electronic sensors to know where they were.
"Gunny," Singe's voice crackled over the comm. "You've got 6 hostiles in stealth suits converging on your position. Range approximately 200 meters, bearing 047 through 093. How can you possibly know that? Cross asked. Boot prints in the dust. Disturbed air patterns. Also, one of them is breathing through his mouth, and stealth suits don't mask sound as well as you think they do. In the observation deck, Theox's forms shift to colors of deep fascination. They seem to possess an almost supernatural awareness of their environment, tracking targets without electronic assistance. Our xenobiologists theorize it's a vestigial predatory instinct from their homeworld's evolutionary history. Singe's rifle spoke 6 times in rapid succession, and 6 stealth suits became visible as their occupants discovered that armor, no matter how advanced, was still governed by the laws of physics. Level 5 complete. Time 17 minutes 42 seconds. New record! The silence that followed was profound. Level 5 had never been completed in under 3 hours. Most warriors took 6 or 7. A few had managed it in 4. 17 minutes was not a completion time, it was a demolition schedule. 2 more levels, Wren observed, checking his ammunition count. Yep, Cross agreed, starting to think they might not have thought this through. In command centers across the galaxy, emergency meetings were being called. Military planners were redesigning strategies that had been in place for centuries. And somewhere in the depths of human space, a very confused Secretary of Defense was trying to understand why every major power in the galaxy was suddenly requesting detailed information about Earth's military capabilities. The humans, unaware of the diplomatic crisis they were causing, prepared for Level 6. They were beginning to enjoy themselves. The arena floor cleared itself of debris and obstacles, leaving only a flat expanse of polished metal. No cover, no terrain advantages, no tactical complications. Just 2 opponents, facing each other across 50 meters of empty space. The Crucible's current champion was a being called Theodora, whose name was spoken in whispers across 17 star systems. She was Varn, but modified beyond easy recognition. 9 feet of crystalline carapace over cybernetic muscle, with 4 arms that could move independently at speeds that made hummingbirds look sluggish. She had the champion's title for 6 years. She had never lost a battle. Her combat record was studied in military academies as the perfect fusion of biological capability and technological enhancement. She was also, according to the arena's biographical files, completely insane. The Butcher of Carinthia, Singe read from his suit's display. 38 fleet actions, 417 personal combat victories, and it says here she once killed an entire boarding party with her bare hands while her ship was actively exploding around her. Anything else? Cross asked, checking the power coupling on Uncle Billy's fishing tackle. Oh, and she doesn't take prisoners. Well, Wren said, hefting the cannon back, that simplifies things. Theodora stood at the far end of the arena, like a monument to violence itself. Her armor caught the arena's lights and threw them back as rainbow fragments that hurt to look at directly. Her weapons were integrated into her limbs, monomolecular blades that could cut through starship hulls, plasma projectors that could melt through battle armor, and a personal shield generator that had never been penetrated. She had been watching the humans' progress through the gauntlet with the interest of a professional, and she had reached certain conclusions. Terrans, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the arena floor, you fight without art, without grace, without any understanding of what war truly means. We fight to win, Wren replied. Everything else is just details. Victory without honor is meaningless. Honor without victory is death. Theodora's forearms spread wide, her weapons powering up with a sound like an electrical storm being born. Then let us see which philosophy serves you better. The battle begun with Theodora doing something that was near impossible. She moved fast enough to become invisible, crossing the 50 meters between them in less time than it took for human synapses to fire.
Cross barely got Uncle Billy's fishing tackle up in time to block the first strike, her suit's servos screaming as they absorbed the impact of monomolecular blades moving at supersonic speeds. The force of the blow drove her to one knee, and her armor's damage display lit up like a Christmas tree. "She's fast," Cross observed, rolling sideways as plasma fire turned the spot where she'd been kneeling into molten metal. "No kidding," Singe replied, his rifle tracking movement that was barely visible to human perception. "Can't get a clean shot. She's moving too—" His sentence was interrupted by Theodora appearing next to him in a shower of sparks, her blades carving through the air where his head had been a microsecond before. Singe threw himself backward, his suit's jump sets firing to carry him clear, but not before one of the monomolecular edges drew a line of fire across his chest plate. "Armor's compromised," he reported, his voice tight with pain and adrenaline. "Not critical, but I'm not taking another hit like that." Ren had been tracking the champion's movement, waiting for the right moment. The cannonback was a devastating weapon, but it was also slow to aim and slower to reload. Against an opponent who moved like accelerated time, patience was the only viable strategy. Theodora understood this. She also understood that patience was a luxury that could be exploited. Her next attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, her 4 arms moving independently to create a storm of blades and plasma that filled the air with death. Cross took a hit that drove her to the ground, her stabilizer sparking. Singe's rifle spoke once, but the shot went wide as he dove for cover that didn't exist. And Ren did something that had never been attempted in the 3,000-year history of the Crucible. He dropped the cannonback. Theodora paused in her assault, confusion evident even through her crystalline features. Warriors didn't abandon their primary weapons. It violated every tactical principle, every strategic doctrine, every rule of engagement that civilized beings recognized. Of course, nobody had ever accused humans of being civilized. Ren's hands went to his suit's emergency releases, and 200 pounds of combat armor fell away like a shed skin. Underneath, he wore nothing but a pressure suit. "Singe," he said conversationally, "remember that thing you said about our armor not being built to protect us from aliens?" "Yeah, Gunny?" "You were right." Ren drove forward, and for the first time in the battle, Theodora was the one who was too slow. Without the armor's weight, without the hydraulic assists and power systems, Ren moved like a human being, which is to say, like something that had evolved to run down prey across endless distances, to fight with desperate cunning when cornered, and to never, ever give up. He got inside Theodora's guard before she could react, his hands closing around one of her crystalline arms. For a moment, they were face to face, human and Varn, predator and predator, artist and pragmatist. "Nothing personal," Ren said. Then he twisted, and 6 years of championship victories ended with the sound of carapace snapping like dry branches. Theodora screamed, a sound that had harmonics in dimensions human ears couldn't perceive, and her remaining weapons fired reflexively. Plasma bursts that could have melted through starship hulls spent themselves against empty air as Ren rolled away, came to his feet, and picked up the cannonback in one fluid motion. The champion, crippled but not defeated, raised her shield generator to maximum power and prepared for one final assault. Ren shot her through it. The tungsten rod didn't pierce the shield so much as it ignored it entirely, moving too fast and hitting too hard for exotic physics to matter. Theodora had time for one last expression of artistic surprise before becoming a brief, bright star. "Level 6 complete," the arena's announcer declared, though the words seemed to stick in whatever passed for its throat. "Time, 4 minutes, 18 seconds. New record!" Ren stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, his pressure suit torn and bloodied, the cannonback smoking in his hands. Around him, the crucible was absolutely silent. Then slowly, Cross began to clap. Singe joined her. After a moment that stretched across light years, 2 trillion beings found their voices and roared approval that shook the arena's foundations. "One more level," Singe said, offering Ren his spare armor plates.
"Yep," Ren replied. "Wonder what they've got left to throw at us."
In the observation deck, Council Velith was no longer making sounds at all. Her psychic projections had collapsed into a tight ball of pure, concentrated shock. Theox had cycled through every color in his species' emotional spectrum and invented several new ones. And War Master Crykor was smiling, an expression that hadn't been seen in 47 years and made nearby security personnel nervous. "What is level 7? Velith finally managed to whisper. Krykor's smile widened, showing teeth that had been filed to points for purely aesthetic reasons.
"Level 7, he said, is me."
Level 7 was supposed to be the culmination of everything the Crucible represented. A battle between the champion and the ultimate expression of warrior perfection. War Master Crykor himself, the being who had designed half the arena's challenges and personally trained 3 generations of galactic champions. In 900 years of active combat, Crykor had never been defeated. He had conquered star systems, toppled governments, and once killed an entire fleet by boarding their flagship and working his way through the crew one by one. He was also, according to Singe's tactical analysis, bigger than a small building and twice as ugly. The War Master stood at the far end of the arena in armor that looked like it had been forged from the heart of a dying star. His weapon was a 2-handed sword that generated its own gravitational field, and his presence was so intimidating that the arena's automated systems had spontaneously upgraded their threat assessment protocols. "Well," Cross observed, making final adjustments to her rebuilt stabilization system, "this should be interesting." "Define interesting," Singe replied, chambering what appeared to be his last depleted uranium round. "The kind of interesting that leaves smoking craters and makes people write epic poems about what happened here." Ren was studying Crykor through his visor, running calculations that all came out the same way. This was going to hurt.
"He's not like the others," he said finally. "Look at his stance, his weapon positioning, the way he's reading the environment."
"Meaning?"
"Meaning he's not an artist, he's a soldier."
This observation proved correct when Crykor opened the battle not with elegant charges or artistic flourishes, but by hurling his massive sword like a spear. The blade crossed the arena faster than human eyes could track, its gravitational field tearing chunks out of the floor as it passed. Cross threw herself sideways, her suit's jump jets firing at emergency power. The sword missed her by inches and embedded itself in the arena wall with enough force to make the entire structure ring like a bell. "Well," she said, picking herself up and checking for broken bones, "at least he's direct." Crykor was already moving, crossing the arena in great bounding leaps that left craters in the metal floor. Without his sword, he should have been vulnerable. Instead, he looked like an avalanche that had developed a sense of purpose. Singe's rifle spoke once, the depleted uranium slug striking Krykor's center mass, with enough force to stagger a small building. The War Master didn't even slow down. "Armor's too thick," Singe reported, already falling back to a secondary position. "Need a bigger gun." "Working on it," Cross replied, and introduced Crykor to the last of Uncle Billy's fishing tackle. The explosive harpoon struck the War Master's chest plate and detonated with a flash that lit up the entire arena. When the smoke cleared, Crykor was still standing, though his armor now sported several interesting new ventilation features. He was also laughing.
"Finally,"
he rumbled, his voice carrying harmonics that made small objects vibrate.
"Warriors who understand that war is not performance. War is work."
He reached the human's position and began demonstrating why he had held his title for 9 centuries. His fists, each the size of a human torso, scarred from heavy use. Where they struck, armor crumpled and the ground shattered. Cross barely avoided being turned into paste, her stabilizers screaming as they absorbed glancing blows that should have been fatal. Singe was forced to abandon his rifle and rely on his suit's close combat systems, a decision that lasted exactly until Crykor backhanded him across the arena with casual efficiency. "Singe!" Ren called out, tracking their teammate's ballistic trajectory.
"Still breathing,"
came the reply from somewhere in the debris.
"Mostly. Could use a moment to inventory my various broken bones."
Which left Ren facing 900 years of accumulated violence with nothing but the cannon back and a dwindling supply of tungsten rods. He fired once. The shot struck Crykor in the shoulder and spun him around, but didn't drop him. The War Master grinned, showing those filed teeth, and kept coming. Ren fired again. This shot took Crykor in the chest, cracking his breastplate and driving him to one knee. For a moment, it looked like the battle might be over. Then Crykor stood up. "Good," he said, and his voice held genuine approval. "Very good, but you misunderstand the nature of this challenge." He gestured to the arena around them, to the watching billions, to the galaxy itself. "Level 7 is not about defeating me," he continued, advancing with the patience of geological time. "Level 7 is about proving that you understand what war truly is." Ren chambered his last tungsten round and fired the cannon back for what would probably be his final shot. "And what is war?" he asked. Krykor's smile was answer enough. "War," he said, "is what happens when being civilized stops working." The final exchange lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Crykor charged, moving faster than something his size had any right to move. When fired, the cannon back speaking its thunderous word one last time. The tungsten rod struck the War Master's center mass, with enough force to crack his armor like an eggshell and drove him to one knee. For a moment, the arena held its breath. Crykor swayed, his massive frame wreathed in sparkling electronics and fractured ceramic. But through sheer will, the kind that had kept him the undefeated for 9 centuries, he forced himself back to his feet. He raised one hand, not to attack, but to signal a stop. The gesture was a command that seemed to freeze the very air. "Enough!" he boomed, his voice still carrying that bone-deep authority despite his shattered armor. "The test is complete." He looked not at his wounds, but directly at Ren, and for a moment, warrior spoke to warrior across the vast gulf of species and philosophy. "Level 7 complete," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the crucible. "Time irrelevant. Method adequate. Result educational." The War Master straightened despite his injuries, his damaged armor making sounds of protest, and something that might have been a smile crossed his scarred features. "You have won, Terrans, not because you are stronger or faster, or more skilled than those who came before. You have won because you understand something that we had forgotten." The arena held its breath. "War is not art," Crykor continued, his voice carrying across 2 trillion speakers to every corner of the galaxy. "War is not performance. War is not poetry or dance or any of the beautiful things we have made it into. War is work. Ugly, necessary work that must be done by those willing to do it." He looked directly at Ren, and for a moment, warrior spoke to warrior across the vast gulf of species and philosophy. "You came here as primitives, and you leave as teachers. The galaxy has been watching you destroy our champions and our illusions with equal efficiency. But more than that, you have reminded us of something we had forgotten in our pursuit of elegant warfare.
Krykor's voice dropped to something that was almost a whisper, but something that still carried to the furthest reaches of the arena.
Sometimes, the only way to preserve what is beautiful is to be willing to do ugly things in its defense.
The War Master straightened, his damaged armor making sounds of protest, and offered Ren what might have been a salute.
Welcome to the galaxy, Terrans. Try not to break it too badly.
Then he walked off the arena floor, leaving 3 humans standing in the wreckage of everything the Crucible had represented for 3,000 years. The silence stretched for heartbeats, then minutes, then began to fragment as 2 trillion beings tried to process what they had just witnessed. Cross limped over to where Singe was extracting himself from a pile of debris, and together they joined Ren in the center of the arena. "So," Cross said, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands, "that happened." "Yep," Singe agreed, checking himself for damage and finding more than he was comfortable with, but less than he'd feared. "Any idea what happens now?" Cross asked. Ren looked around the arena, at the watching crowds, at the cameras that were broadcasting their conversation to the galaxy, and shrugged.
"Now we go home," he said, "and hope they remember this lesson long enough for it to matter."
High above, in observation decks and command centers, military leaders were already implementing new training protocols. Weapons manufacturers were redesigning their entire catalogs, and diplomats were drafting very careful messages to a small blue world that had just reminded the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed. The humans walked off the arena floor to thunderous silence, carrying their battered weapons and damaged armor, leaving behind a legacy that would reshape galactic warfare for generations to come. Behind them, the Crucible began the slow process of cleaning up the debris and trying to figure out what it wanted to be when it grew up. The universe, meanwhile, started preparing for the possibility that it might never be quite the same again. Author's note: the Cannonback 5000 is not recommended for civilian use. Uncle Billy's fishing tackle requires a Class 7 explosive handling permit in most civilized star systems. The opinions expressed by Gunnery Sergeant Calder do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Terran Defense Force, though they probably should. In memory of all humanity's warriors who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve what is beautiful is to be willing to do ugly work in its defense.